2007 was also an important year for two other reasons that are very relevant to this story. It was a year that a field of genome-wide association studies really hit prime time. Scientists finally had the technology, and the technology had dropped to a sufficiently low price that they could now screen thousands of patients at a time for all kinds of common diseases. No, we're not talking cystic fibrosis now, we're talking diabetes and heart disease and arthritis, the common diseases that most of us in this audience would really care about. They were able to do these analyses and make real breakthroughs in terms of identifying, or at least mapping, high-risk genes in the genome that predispose to these common diseases. They're called complex diseases for a reason, because there are multiple genes that undoubtedly play a role in our tendency to gain weight, or to get diabetes, or to suffer depression. Obviously, the environment plays a huge role as well. And at the end of 2007, companies like 23andMe in California, Decode in Iceland, and a couple of others came out and sort of began to leverage that platform and make it relevant for you and me and the man on the street. And so 23andMe said, for $999, spit in a cup, send us your saliva, we'll extract DNA, we'll put it on one of these DNA chips made by a company that they were using in San Diego called Illumina, and we will assay about 500,000 specific letters in your genome. 500,000 sounds like a lot. It's a dip in the ocean compared to the 6 billion in your human genome. But of those 500,000 A's, C's, T's, or G's, a good portion of them have been associated in the literature with these common disease risks. And so that's what 23andMe was about. When I first heard the name 23andMe, I thought, David Beckham, what the hell's he up to now? I mean, he was the most famous 23 I could think of. And only later did it dawn on me that it was the 23 pairs of chromosomes. And when they came out, I love this headline from the Daily Telegraph. Google wife targets world DNA domination, said the Daily Telegraph, a beautifully tabloid-worthy headline for such a prestigious newspaper. The founder of 23andMe, Anne Wojcicki, is married to Sergey Brin, the co-founder of Google. And that's one reason among many why the company attracted so much attention. They received all kinds of invitations to national TV, the Today Show. They went on Oprah Winfrey's show with Anne Wojcicki, 8.5 months pregnant, and Oprah said, "Oh, please have your baby now, please, on air." Sadly, she didn't. They won Time's Best Invention of the Year for 2008, and of course, the highest accolade of all was Linda Avey appearing on the cover of my magazine. 23andMe has been tagged as being a kind of a recreational pursuit. And yes, there is a recreational element to it, and I don't think they should apologize for that. It's great fun, it's very addictive, and since the price of this test is now less than $500, it may be that that's all you need to justify taking a look. But it can provide some very serious information. And with a certain sense of irony, one of the best examples is actually Sergey Brin himself. So Sergey's mother was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease a few years back. He was already a known contributor to Parkinson's charities, such as the Michael J. Fox Foundation. And Parkinson's is not typically a Mendelian genetic disease in the same way that muscular dystrophy or cystic fibrosis is. But in rare families, let me put it this way, rare families have been documented where there is a straightforward genetic glitch that is inherited that causes the disease. It's particularly, it seems to be more prevalent in families of Ashkenazi Jewish descent, as Brin's. And so he was able to look query specific genes in his 23andMe record. And this is from my own record of this particular gene. So there's a gene called LRRK2 sitting on chromosome 12. And he and anybody else could go to their website, key in this particular gene, or key in the name of the particular SNP that is known to encode that mutation. And sure enough, he found he had the mutation that has been published in many peer-reviewed journals. So there's no doubt about it. He carries this risk gene. What his Parkinson's risk, no one really knows, because these families are very rare. He puts it at about 50%. And as he started a blog, and he said, until the fountain of youth is discovered, we will all have some conditions in our old age, only we won't know what they're going to be. Well, I have a better guess now than almost anybody else for what ills may be mine. and I have decades to prepare for it. Not just in terms of changing his own lifestyle and looking into potential medications, but also funding the research that can help find a cure for this terrible disease. There was perhaps an even more dramatic example from the co-founder of Decode Genetics, also offering a direct-to-consumer genetic test, very much like 23andMe. Indeed, many of the genes that have been identified and were put on these panels were identified by the team at Decode in Iceland. Jeff Gulcher, in his late 40s, got his results, found that the most dramatic, the most startling, was a doubled increased lifetime risk of prostate cancer, based on an analysis of maybe half a dozen, perhaps 10 different genetic markers, published in top journals like Nature and Nature Genetics. Jeff founded the company, but even he didn't quite know what to make of it, so he took these results to his GP. His GP certainly didn't know what to make of it. They did a PSA test, which would be the standard way of assessing a man's risk of prostate cancer. That was inconclusive. So his GP said, Jeff, I suggest you go see a urologist. And Decode was collaborating with one of the top guys in the country. Jeff went to see the urologist. The urologist, erring on the safe side, said, let's take a biopsy. They did a biopsy, and the biopsy revealed a grade 6 on a scale of 1 to 10, a grade 6 prostate cancer, which he subsequently had his prostate removed, all because he spat in a cup and sent it into the lab. Now that is, I must be very clear, that's a very extreme example, but that's some of the information that people are able to get now, and in some cases through this direct-to-consumer route. One other anecdote is, again, across, just down the road at Harvard Medical School, George Church has launched something called the Personal Genome Project. 10 volunteers, one of whom is Steve Pinker, the noted Harvard psychologist and author. And Steve, when he did his results and got some of this first tranche of genetic data back, this is all open, this is all on a public website, found that he carried a variant that put him at pretty high risk, it would appear, for hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. That's a sudden heart attack. He's obviously been followed up extensively by the team at the Brigham, I'm not saying this is a false alarm, but they feel so long as he goes back for regular monitoring every year or two, he should be okay. But that's another pretty exciting and interesting example. I'm not going to go through all of my results. I'm sure there are people in the audience who have done 23andMe or Navigenics or one of these other companies, and that's just a screenshot of the kind of information you can get about health risks, about different traits, some of which are kind of fun and humorous, as well as ancestry, fantastic information about ancestry. And before I leave the subject of 23andMe, I must also point out that this summer they published a paper in which they had taken information volunteered by some of their clients, thousands of their clients who can fill in surveys on the site and give them information about whether they're left or right-handed, whether they suffer migraines, whether they can, after they have a healthy dinner with asparagus, whether they can smell asparagus in their urine, important traits like this. And genes for these traits have been mapped. And I hear some snickering in the audience. Yes, of course, some of these are kind of ridiculous. But in a few weeks at the American Society of Human Genetics, they will be presenting the same kind of strategy, the results of the same strategy for Parkinson's disease. They've compiled data on thousands of Parkinson's patients who have submitted voluntarily information back to 23andMe. Since 23andMe already has their genetic markers cataloged in their database, they can now put those two together and see if they can pinpoint genes for Parkinson's disease, just as they have done for some of those other slightly less important traits. And looking forward to hearing the results of that.